Shut that channel. If they're not going to listen, they don't deserve the courtesy. Commander Joran Vale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The tension in the chamber, heavy with recycled air and the stagnant weight of 19 failed petitions, shifted as the screen blinked off with a dull snap. The Zelveth Compact senior liaison had just dismissed Earth's final appeal with a thin smile and the phrase, "irrelevant grievance," moments before transmission cut. The silence in Earth's diplomatic core wasn't peaceful. It was crowded with heat, sweat, and the growing scrape of chairs pushed back by men who had endured too many humiliations. Outside the Terran Assembly building, protesters swarmed behind thermal glass barriers, their chants muted but visible, their signs pressing like accusations. No more appeals. Our crews aren't bargaining chips. Raid, not rescued. The bodies looked small from the conference floor's upper-tier overlook, but the emotion behind them wasn't. Bale turned from the screen, his sharp-featured face drawn and shadowed in the low lighting of the chamber. The back of his neck itched. Not from nerves, but from the synthetic collar of his diplomatic uniform. Every time he wore it, someone from Earth got detained, fined, or killed under the guise of interstellar compliance review. "They've turned supply seizures into a blueprint," said Director Halloran Voss, seated at the far end of the oval table, one hand gripped tight around a ceramic cup gone cold an hour ago. "Our convoys aren't inspected anymore, they're looted. Our captains imprisoned, trade routes tagged for rerouting through Zelveth through-proof corridors. Then we stop sending convoys," murmured someone else. A junior advisor, face pale. "We pull everything back, go dark, and let them rewrite our presence across the core systems?" Voss shot back. "They'd seal it off before we finished retracting. No, that's what they want. That's what this containment model was built for." That phrase, containment model, had been whispered across internal meetings for the past 5 years. It wasn't an official term, it wasn't on paper, but everyone in the room knew what it meant. It was the shape of slow death. Tariffs tightened like a noose, embargoes stacked layer by layer until trade collapsed, reputations ground down through court rulings Earth wasn't allowed to attend. Every sanction was painted in legality, every policy masked in diplomatic language. Every act of aggression buried under terminology that didn't trigger war. Joran stepped to the window, not for effect, for air. Below, the protest was swelling. Men clanged metal rods against the perimeter fence. Someone threw a data slate. Shattered on impact, the screen flickering static before going dead. A reminder of how many off-world communications now came back with access denied or route invalid. "They're winning without firing a weapon," Voss said, "and we're watching it happen." "We're logging it," said Joran. He glanced back toward them. "They think Earth doesn't react, but we record everything. Every fake inspection, every silent dock seizure, every detainee fabricated through protocol misalignment." "You think locks will change anything?" the advisor snapped. "You think—" "No," Joran interrupted, stepping forward. "But they're not for them, they're for us. Because this doesn't end in protest." The room quieted. Somewhere in the background, a vent rotated with a dull clunk, cycling out the sour stink of men who'd been in the same room for 13 hours. Not one of them had moved to leave. The petition to the Zelveth Assembly had been the last officially sanctioned appeal left. Earth's communications with the Galactic Tribunal had been postponed indefinitely, pending inspection compliance. The compact had turned Earth into a procedural ghost and painted them unfit to participate in galactic governance. And now, the Herix raids had started. Earth's civilian trade routes, thin and already compromised, had become hunting grounds. Ships labeled "flagged for reassessment" were stripped mid-route, captains arrested, cargo redirected. In a briefing earlier that morning, one freighter's last automated ping had shown an unmarked compact patrol attaching grapplers to its hull while broadcasting a false engine failure beacon. There were 27 Terrans aboard that vessel. No one knew where they were now. "They'll say we provoked this," Voss muttered, "that we didn't comply, that we overextended, that we resisted arbitration." Joran's jaw moved. No sound came out at first. "Let them say it." He turned, slow, to face the assembly again. His fingers rested on the edge of the table, nails pressing into the alloy strip embedded there. A small, almost imperceptible vibration ran through the surface. From beneath, hidden behind a wall panel, a thin light pulsed once. A confirmation code. Low level. Undetected. Today, Joran said, eyes hard. They laughed at our restraint. That was their final misstep. The junior advisor stiffened. Are we authorizing counteraction? No. That would imply a declaration. Joran looked around the room, one face at a time. What's coming doesn't need their permission to begin. No one spoke. Outside, the air was growing thick with heat. Terran security units, dressed in matte gray and riot-stationed, tightened the line. Protesters pushed harder. Something cracked. A sonic barrier, dropping from a high-pitched shield array, and a man staggered backward, blood blooming from a cut above his eye. It wasn't lethal, but it was enough to tip the line into chaos. Hands rose. Flags tore. Someone screamed the word traitor. Someone else screamed heroes. The noise bled into the building, faint but violent. Inside, Joran's wrist display activated. Not visibly. Just a soft pressure under the skin sensor panel. A light under his sleeve turned from blue to white. The room didn't need an announcement. Every senior official present had been trained to recognize silent signal protocol. Time? Voss asked. 2 weeks, Joran answered. The compact will think we're scrambling, that we're trying to rebuild, that we're afraid. And we're not. He stepped back from the table. No, he said, we've just finished counting. One by one, the officials rose. Not fast, not theatrical, just coordinated. There would be no more appeals, no public statements, no dramatic rejections, only movement, quiet and absolute, and far above Earth's atmosphere, unnoticed in the debris clutter of defunct stations and broken trade buoys, several civilian-labeled freighters began shifting orientation degrees at a time, realigning in long-forgotten vector grids. They weren't retreating. They were waking. The bulk freighter Calvex Harrier, flagged as a civilian transport, broke formation an hour after planetary nightfall over Yulvan Station. It didn't issue a course correction. It didn't ping traffic control. Its transponder blinked twice, paused for 7 seconds, then looped a noise tag signal only Terran deep code operators could interpret. The station's dockmaster logged it as a standard drift deviation. No alarms followed. No one aboard the compact side noticed. But someone was watching. 2 levels beneath Earth's strategic enforcement bunker, Commander Joran Vale stood before a field chart with no star labels. The display pulsed not with routes, but with movement thresholds. He folded his arms as a third officer in the room confirmed another activation. 38 confirmed. The analyst didn't look up from his terminal. All within buffer zones, all unmapped from compact central overlays. Vale tapped a point on the board, highlighting the Selbin corridor. Time to disruption? 11 minutes. The chamber smelled of aged plastine, dried salt from skin trapped under weeks-old uniforms, and the faint, oily trace of thermal adhesives used in armor sheath repairs. Not clean, but grounded, real. The kind of scent that didn't belong in ceremonial offices or treaty signing halls. Pull data from Harrier spine cargo, Vale ordered. Another officer keyed in the sequence. On the map, a flicker emerged, raw and clean. The cargo manifest expanded, slot by slot, until the core panel showed something the compact hadn't seen in years. Arcal grid. Segment code 17A, embedded across heat diffusion layers, masked by mineral goods and obsolete farming mech components. The command staff stared. Run the math again, Vale said. We can't afford a false deployment. We didn't, came the reply. We buried this 2 decades ago for this moment. It's not error, it's ignition. High above their heads, in orbit over Farson's outer rim, the freighter Lenar's Bridge pivoted 36 degrees against its flight path. From the outside, it looked like a maneuvering thruster correction, but its secondary cargo bay rotated with it, revealing a narrow spine of interlinked modules, now pointed at the node entry arc for compact relay traffic. Another flicker. Offline. That was the first node collapse. By the time Gensec Minor and Torvin Straylight activated, the compact's transit network was no longer receiving consistent update pulses from its own lattice. 7 major corridors, Selbin, Grexmar, Halavar Reach, Nestron Delta, Orabon Arc, Veyron Trail, and the Eltan Fold, all experienced node slippage. Error messages appeared in transport vessels across the grid, screens displaying static overlays or freezing mid-sync. The illusion of control cracked. Back at Earth Command, Vale leaned over the console and exhaled through his nose. Begin cascade simulation. Confirm redundancy triggers. On the third tier of data, another operator flagged the results. They're locked out. Pathway resets aren't syncing. Node mirrors are stuck in looped initialization. Good. Vale's voice was flat. That means they'll think it's a failure, not sabotage. The strategy had taken years to assemble. Long-haul freighters outfitted in secret, their internal cords gutted and reconfigured. What appeared to be storage for irrigation pipes or medical resupply crates had been filled with Archau grid modulators. Quiet, long-sleep systems, designed not to destroy, but to dislocate. The compact had built its empire on movement. Its strength wasn't in weaponry, but in control of space. Trade, migration, and emergency routing all flowed through its infrastructure. And now the corridors that allowed that dominance were being rerouted by ghost signals launched from civilian vessels. Earth had abandoned infringed territories years ago. Vale turned to the room. We issue no communication, no admission, no threat. We are not seen. And if they trace the surge, they won't. Because they're not looking for weapons. They're looking for rebels, for riots, for uprisings, not for architecture. Somewhere near the Nestron Delta, the freighter Hatchery 7 vanished from tracking logs. It didn't explode. It didn't transmit distress. It just shut itself down. After uploading a final redirect burst that desynchronized compact node mirrors and replaced the mainframe header with an obsolete Earth core routing signature from 41 years prior. As soon as their AI saw it, it dismissed it as a corruption error. That was the plan. Ely called us dormant, said the lead systems engineer, stepping forward. They measured our warfleet count, laughed at our lowered orbital maintenance budget, but this is what we built instead of guns. Vale nodded once. Deploy secondary loop agents, randomize delay patterns between 5 and 20 minutes, make it look like a virus that's still mutating. Another operator spoke from the corner. Transit requests across compact space are stalling. We're getting noise chatter from the Veyron Trail Command, unsecured. They think it's a lattice break. Fleet ships are pinging for manual revalidation from rim colonies. Let them chase ghosts, Vale said. Let them try to hold their web together without knowing which thread we're pulling. Across the compact, screens began cycling strange timestamps. Standard synchronization routines clashed with overlapping route designations. Ships began experiencing odd visual feedback. HUDs showing one trajectory but grav latches indicating another. In one recorded case, 2 compact cargo haulers began drifting toward each other on intersecting lanes, both swearing their navigation was green. Traffic Control in Halavar issued emergency grounding protocols. The compact had never planned for the idea that Earth would attack transit, not fleets. They assumed deterrence came from dreadnoughts, not delay. But Archal Grid wasn't meant for conquest. It was engineered for disruption. Total denial of continuity. And right now, it was working. Vale's compad vibrated, a coded pulse from Fleet Liaison. Status, he said. 39 of 91 freighters, fully active. 19 confirmed route fractures, no engagement. And the rest? Still dormant, awaiting condition shift. Vale's knuckles cracked as he folded his hands. They'll wake when it's time. Outside the chamber, the night over Earth's surface grew colder. The sky wasn't quiet, but empty. Commercial traffic had thinned. Satellite arrays had gone still. But the stars were moving. Slightly. Not by accident. They were ships realigning. Slow. Deliberate. and across compact command posts, the phrase began to circulate with growing concern. Why are Earth's ships off? There was no answer, just a field of vessels, once dismissed as merchant shadows, now sliding into place like bones setting into a structure compact minds could not yet comprehend. By the time they understood, the corridors would be gone. FTL Junction 9A in the Halavar Reach stuttered mid-cycle. What should have been a seamless relay pulse between the core accelerator and its outbound node froze at 61%. The control deck's lead technician blinked, tapped the screen again, and frowned. A black triangle replaced the navigation route. Then the others began to flicker. The deck control to lane command, primary threads offline, he said, raising his voice. Repeat, 9A is not cycling. We're stuck, mid-oscillation. From the upper tier of the transit tower, a supervisor leaned forward over his console, his jacket unbuttoned and fingers stained with grease from a rushed docking valve repair earlier that day. He didn't bother to mask his concern. Kill the jump prep, pull traffic from the ring before we lose calibration. Too late. 3 inbound vessels were already caught in the buffer hold. Their engines had throttled down in anticipation of jump, and now they drifted. No push, no anchor. Inside the ships, bridge officers yelled across compartments as their guidance relays began to desync from station protocols. What had been a clean handoff from relay to vessel flickered into overlapping course projections. One ship began rotating uncontrollably on its ZXS, its gyros confused by contradicting magnetic orientation pulses. Back on the tower, emergency lights turned amber. Systems trying to reassert node sequence, someone called out. It's pulling outdated data, 13 standard years old. That's not even in the current loop. Static began to buzz through internal audio links. Navigation displays rebooted one after the other. Black triangles covered the outbound map. Meanwhile, in Compact Command Relay Station Veyrin 4, another crisis unfolded. The central uplink hub failed to synchronize with 6 of its peripheral satellite relays. Backup teams initiated a handshake override, only to find every checksum returning mismatched signatures. The system wasn't merely lagging. It was rejecting its own authority. Lieutenant Strava locked his screen and stood, wiping a line of sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve. Every command channel's corrupted. I've got checksum floods across the board. Diagnostic loops are infinite. It's not a virus, it's systemic. His commanding officer, Admiral Turnus, stepped into the command room wearing a coat that still smelled faintly of cold sealant and stale fabric. He took one look at the screen. What are we looking at? Soft interference, built to imitate drift errors, Strava answered. But it's too clean. Everything is glitching with just enough variation to mask the pattern. This isn't coincidence. The Admiral didn't speak right away. Instead, he turned to the rear of the command center and tapped in a security override on the wall-mounted node grid. Nothing updated. He frowned and reached again. Who built our redundancy protocol? Terran fabricated mirrors, came the reply. Licensed 2 decades ago during the stabilization charter period, the components were considered neutral tech. Turnus's eyes narrowed. Then they've been in place this entire time. Elsewhere, in the rim city of Tolvin's Deep, known for its dense trade junctions and massive consumer storage sectors, the collapse hit differently. Supply deliveries halted with no explanation. Cargo lists reverted to archived templates from past cycles. Every vending terminal displayed a frozen status message. RE, load pending. Broadcast networks began repeating old footage. The same market update played 3 times before someone noticed. Citizens filled the streets, confused. Local law enforcement requested clarification from the district exchange node. The response was a scrambled burst, followed by silence. Civilian routers tried reconnecting. Instead of live data, households began receiving outbound cargo schedules from long-canceled trade fleets. Ships that no longer existed, with destinations outside mapped territory. A boy looked up from his father's tablet and asked, "Why is it sending us to Earth?" The father stared, unsure. No one had mentioned Earth in years. Back on Earth, Commander Joran Vale watched the data waterfall on a wall display that wasn't decorative. Every field in the feed had a purpose. Every response lag was timed. The sequence of failure wasn't accidental. It was architecture. He motioned toward the lower console. Report. Phase 1 complete. 71 corridors registering conflict overlap. Compact lattice nodes are now defaulting to legacy logs. Their systems are trying to reconcile past with present. They're fighting themselves. Civilians, Vale asked. No contact, but traffic control layers are beginning to broadcast distress, not standard, fragments. That was expected. Arcal Grid didn't aim for immediate visual chaos. It weaponized certainty. It whispered the wrong instructions at exactly the right time. It fed valid commands with twisted headers. It broke systems not by force, but by causing them to distrust themselves. Vale approached the center table and pressed a single key embedded in the surface. The lights in the room dimmed slightly, only to adjust to the glow of the large field graph that replaced the map. Black triangles began to populate it. Node points across compact territory that no longer functioned. 71 and counting. A whisper behind him. They're isolated. A pause. Then Vale said, No, they've been abandoned. They just didn't know it yet. In the compact capital of Veltron, the high-network court met in emergency session. Advisors stormed into the chamber mid-debate, carrying portable displays flashing blank response logs from 5 sectors. An emergency representative slammed his palm against a console, trying to trigger override access. The system replied with a line none of them had seen before. Terminal, not recognized by current routing tree. A senator rose in alarm. Are we under attack? Another snapped back. There are no enemy ships, no declared engagements. This is infrastructure collapse. But their words echoed in the same chamber that had laughed at Earth's protests weeks before. That chamber now glowed with silent maps, looped alerts, and a schematic no one dared name. An outline flashing at the bottom of the Council's intelligence feed. Phase 1 complete. Back in Earth's bunker, Vale sat without ceremony. He wasn't smiling. This wasn't satisfaction. This was justice, rendered through planning, not revenge. Hold position, let them respond. He knew they would scream sabotage, accuse pirates, blame faulty AI, anything but face the truth. The trap had been set in shipping logs and public manifests. Not with fleets, not with fire, with silence. The grid hadn't exploded. It had awakened. Commander Joran Vale leaned forward over the operations board. The screen before him wasn't a map anymore. It had become a blueprint of betrayal. Layered, timed, and seeded inside every arrogant assumption the Compact had ever made about Terran compliance. His fingertips hovered over the surface. With a single passcode entry, 30 years of embedded sabotage would reach ignition. He didn't hesitate. Protocol severance, Vale said. Full deployment. Synchronize at sector index, not timestamp. Understood, replied the systems director, voice clipped but steady. He keyed in the armament call for the first sector. Denmar Forge ring. Somewhere in compact space, what looked like a structural support column within an orbital alloy foundry began to warm from the inside. The power draw was minimal, but targeted. Inside the column, a null mine, long dormant, hidden beneath thermal shielding layers labeled as cooling system backups. It pulsed twice, then opened its containment cycle. Inside the foundry, workers noticed something was wrong when conveyor arm 31 stuttered mid-glide and stopped above an unfinished hull plate. The automated arm locked up with a snap, dropped its grip, and froze. Then the diagnostic panel beside it blinked and reverted to a maintenance screen last seen 17 years ago. No one had touched it. Technicians swarmed. Error reports came in from across the floor. Data conflicts, firmware mismatches, auto-prioritization systems reclassifying all orders as obsolete. Control screamed for override. Nothing worked. In the command office above, Factory Overseer Grenak slammed his fist against a diagnostic input console. Why the hell are we building Corvette plating models from the 3rd cycle? This design's been dead for a decade. One of his aides stared at the system display. They're not just old. They're Earth-locked. Earth-locked? Piece parts are being shipped to black box registries that match Terran procurement routes. Grinnick's face went white. The second null mine detonated, not physically but structurally. At the manufacturing node in Veltrin Spindle, cooling pumps began cycling in reverse. Diagnostic AI attempted a correction. Instead, its checksum validation flagged every component on the line as corrupted. The fail-safe routine kicked in and rolled back all systems to their original firmware baseline. The plant rebooted. Every control surface now displayed Terran export markings. At Earth Command, the operators tracked it all, system by system, dock by dock. Like lighting matches across dried tinder, each activation unraveled the compact's illusion of industrial supremacy. Next phase, go, Vale ordered. Node induction units at Raven Belt are lit. Null mines embedded inside the supply filters are triggering rewrite commands now. They're mistaking Terran config shells for default systems. Across the belt, command officials inside Compact's orbital facilities screamed into open comms as system clocks went haywire. Schedule queues were pulled from non-existent fleets. An entire shift of resource tugs launched themselves on automated paths toward drop points that hadn't been used since the initial Treaty of Varneth. Operators on the floor began pulling power manually, ripping out key blocks, severing command wires with cutters, trying to reassert control physically. It didn't work. Inside every compact manufacturing AI was a mirror. Not digital, but architectural. Earth's engineers had designed those back doors before the treaty was even signed. Not to control, not to broadcast, but to sleep until told otherwise. And now they were listening. Valet paced. How long until they isolate the breach points? Even if they find them, they can't reverse them. The protocol mirror structure copies their rollback every time they attempt to restore function. They're restoring our sabotage into each clean reboot. In the orbital depot of Curel Station, the floor smelled of scorched fabric and melting insulation. Dockhands pulled freight out of loading lines by hand. Heavy clamps had stopped responding. Entire cargo manifests were looping their loadout ID tags. Every crate now listed as awaiting Terra custodian audit. The compact security officer shouted, "What the hell does that mean?" His commanding sergeant looked down at the flashing text on his tablet and replied, "It means we don't own any of this anymore." Every facility impacted shared one thing. None of them exploded. There were no plumes of fire, no alarms that came too late. These weren't attacks in the traditional sense. They were infections reaching symptom stage, and they were irreversible. A field station over Grelov 9 tried to isolate its foundry core. The engineers switched the control board to local access, tried to override from physical subsystems. The moment the panel lit up, the screen displayed one phrase: Severance executed. The message wasn't animated. It wasn't dramatic. It was surgical, final. At Earth Command, Vale stood in silence as more confirmations came through. Not one of the null mines had failed. Every protocol cascade had successfully back-channeled compact infrastructure into ghost systems. Earth had long since hidden behind commercial agreements and humanitarian development contracts. "This isn't sabotage," Vale said. "This is ownership." Behind him, the systems director exhaled slowly. The room had grown warmer. Too many active feeds, too much friction from systems being watched in real time. The scent of hot plastic, old wiring, and compressed air mixed with sweat-soaked uniforms. Vale turned away from the board. "Shut the uplinks. We've seen what we need to see." Someone hesitated. "We're not pushing Phase 2? "Not yet," Vale replied. "They're still trying to understand Phase 1. Back in the Compact's Core Economic Council, chaos reigned. Ministers of supply, trade, and manufacturing argued over feed data that contradicted itself every hour. Reboot attempts failed. Archives pulled different versions of the same events. No AI trusted its own memory. The senior advisor finally spoke above the noise. "This isn't an error, this is engineered." A silence fell. Then a young technician whispered from the side of the room, "This is Earth." The sentence struck harder than a missile. Everywhere across their network, the same failure pattern repeated. Nodes, built by Terrans now failing in unison. And outside their walls, Earth said nothing. It didn't need to. The Emergency Council on Veltron Prime began with 13 members present. Within 10 minutes, only 8 remained seated. By 20, 3 had walked out, their aides trailing behind, whispering into malfunctioning comsets. The lights flickered once, just long enough to silence the room. No one reached for the switch. They knew better now. Holographic charts on the walls once displayed compact productivity indexes, each line tracking upward, wrapped in celebration. Now those same projections collapsed midstream. Sector revenue models folded in real time as regional supply chains crashed under phantom overload triggers. Warehouses reported shortages for items they hadn't even logged as stocked. Transactional AIs began requesting authentication keys from departments that had been dissolved decades ago. Councilman Brevik adjusted his collar, sweat bleeding through the fabric at his shoulders. Status on Pelvar Exchange. The trade minister leaned forward, scanning a looped financial update. Down for 14 hours. Core breach not found. The failsafe engaged automatically. But it's stuck in a demand feed loop. Brevik's face tightened. Loop directive? Exactly that. The economic load balancer thinks we're still issuing high-demand calls from Denmark and Orobon. Those sectors are dead. Across the outer rim, freight lanes had gone silent. Cargo vessels dispatched from the central core never arrived. Emergency route resets had sent entire fleets toward unmapped or deregistered paths. One resupply hauler, Leiston Range, was recorded entering the Rivet corridor. That corridor had been closed for years. The AI marked it as active and vanished. 3 other ships followed similar phantom instructions. None returned. Compact Central News Grid issued a correction broadcast. The feed repeated itself 20 minutes later. Then again. Anchors began referencing events out of sequence, reading from cached reports dated days prior. Facial expressions grew uneasy as off-camera producers fed contradicting prompts into earcoms. Studio floors that once smelled of ozone-filtered airflow and warm equipment now stank of stale coolant and overheated plastics. A broadcast technician pulled his headset off and stared at his console. "Timeline desync," he muttered, the entire feed's echoing itself. In the Capitol Plaza, a dozen billboards cycled public morale programs. On half of them, the same soldier smiled through an endless loop, unity through order, victory through stability. The other half glitched. Background buildings faded, the face warped. One feed blinked out entirely, then resumed with a different caption, "Terra approves. Order redesigned." By nightfall, 6 rim colonies had lost contact entirely. Auto beacons continued transmitting, static pulses repeating calibration signals that no longer matched known systems. When emergency response units launched, they found empty outposts, reversion-locked comms towers, and power cores rebooted to pre-alliance formatting. On Tyrex Station, the command center received a distress call from Elwyn's Reach. The voice was clipped, confused. "This is Reach Control. We've lost food registry access. Water rations are duplicating and clearing instantly. Main system claims delivery scheduled by Terran Logistics. That's not a current contract. We have no ships here." But the bay doors opened, then closed. "Please advise." Then nothing. Inside Earth's control chamber, Vale stood with his arms behind his back. He didn't ask for new reports. The silence from Compact Systems was confirmation enough. "Any movement from Compact leadership?" "Only confusion," answered one of the analysts. "Their regional command nodes are trying to pull redundancy files from their oldest backups, but the backups were written using Terran libraries. Every fix they apply activates another override." The scent in the room carried notes of machine oil and rubber insulation, not strong, just old. The kind of aging infrastructure smell that no longer needed masking. Their systems were working. They hadn't needed to force anything. Bale's voice was low. "They're fighting ghosts, systems that never left, only waited." In Compact's Ministry of Internal Security, the Grand War Board cracked under its own weight. Dozens of command staff crowded a semicircular table, each holding tablets and field notes that contradicted every previous report. In one corner, a junior officer raised his hand. The Surlon Gate initiated a route reset that sent 3 capital freighters toward the Ganoth Void. We've never opened a trade lane there. The senior controller spun his chair. Then why would the system allow it? The reply came from across the table. Because it thinks we did. In 208L, that cycle's been archived for decades. Another voice interrupted. Not anymore. Silence rippled across the room. Every time they touched the system to fix something, they restored something older. Every attempt at restoration reactivated dormant conditions set by Terran command codes buried years deep. The Compact's infrastructure wasn't collapsing. It was remembering. Back in the plaza, the Victory model hologram, once the crown jewel of Compact propaganda, sputtered. The soldier's face froze. The banner beneath him rippled, glitched, then shattered into digital fragments. The final image wasn't blank. It was overridden by a static linked sequence. No current authority found. Civilians watching froze. They weren't screaming, not yet, but they started moving. Backward, inward, unsure whether to panic or prepare. Somewhere on the rim, in a settlement untouched by formal war, a security post received one last system notification. Regional supply queue redirected. Destination, Earth-like node. Verification not required. New authority. Restructure in progress. The officer stared at the screen and said nothing. There had been no ships. No blasts. No demands. But everything they trusted had stopped working. And Earth hadn't said a word. The first leak didn't come from a government channel. It arrived on a civilian feed routed through an old educational network used to archive open planetary broadcasts. The footage showed a compact frigate intercepting a relief vessel near Murnith's orbit. The crew was forced to kneel, arms behind their backs. Audio captured every order barked from the Compact's boarding captain. The date stamp, 8 years prior, matched a day the Compact claimed was accident-free across contested territories. The second leak came 20 minutes later. It showed a diplomatic meeting between Compact trade officials and the Yetheri Syndicate, a criminal faction blacklisted by 36 planetary councils. The feed was uncut. The Compact's envoys could be seen negotiating contraband movement paths through Earthlink colonies in exchange for smuggling immunity. One official even mentioned controlled chaos as a strategy to make Earth appear disorganized. The third file was worse. It showed a private transmission from a Compact regional magistrate ordering the Harix raids. His words were calm, recorded in his office over the soft rattle of a nearby document processor. If we can trigger enough security failures in their trade sectors, he said, sipping from a steaming cup, we'll justify tighter policy without ever needing a blockade. The trick is framing it as procedural, just enough to exhaust them. The timestamp had been independently verified by 12 non-Lincoln stations within the first hour. By the third hour, riots had broken out across the Kelvar Strip. Protesters dragged down a bronze Compact emblem from the outer wall of a former trade hall, poured flammable resin over it, and set it ablaze. No one cheered. They simply watched it melt into itself. By the fifth hour, 4 neutral systems issued a joint declaration suspending all Compact interactions, pending criminal investigation. Inside Compact Assembly Hall, the council room once known for echoing applause had descended into closed-door screaming. Senators pounded their fists on the bench rails, not out of solidarity, but confusion. Their aides brought in tablets and hardwired displays, each showing another confirmation report from systems they'd assumed were allied. "What is this?" Assembly Leader Corlin shouted, holding up a tablet with a photo of his own vote-approving surveillance drones in Terran refugee sectors. The image was real, the timestamp unalterable. "This is an internal record." Vice Minister Dahran, his forehead soaked with sweat, leaned forward. "They didn't break in. These weren't stolen. Earth waited. They never hacked our systems. They were our systems." The doors behind them burst open, one cracked off its upper hinge. Staffers from the Data Integrity Bureau streamed in, clutching more evidence. They just dropped a payload showing compact biometric trials on prisoner transport crews. Our own ships, our own courts signed off on it under falsified security waivers. Corlin's voice dropped into his throat. That's not possible. It's already trending. On the outer rim, colonies that had tried to remain neutral found their public forums flooded with raw footage of Earth's legal teams being denied entry to compact courts, of Terran medical supply routes being labeled as economic contamination vectors. Each video ended with a signature Earth refused to issue compact officials forging approvals for rerouting convoys, blocking food shipments, even delaying critical planetary evacuations during a solar flare surge that killed 3,000 colonists on Rutheron 8. In the war room beneath Earth's Strategic Command, Vale stood alone at the center console. The light from the overhead projection system etched sharp angles across his face. "Did they respond?" he asked. His advisor approached slowly. "They've issued an ultimatum." Vale didn't turn. "Read it. They demand full disclosure of our operational sabotage network, surrender of all remaining vessels operating under Vanguard Directive 14, and withdrawal from all occupied corridors." He waited. "They've given us 36 hours. Vale nodded once. "Send nothing." The advisor frowned. "Nothing? We speak through fact. Let them drown in their own footage." Meanwhile, in the central forum square on Salor Prime, compact citizens gathered beneath a broken audio dome. One side of the screen played a looped compact loyalty statement. The other, now hijacked by civilian data runners, streamed Terran leaks in sequence. Entire families stood still as the truth unfolded, slow, clinical, without commentary. Footage of detained Earth miners forced to work under false environmental flags. A compact tribunal sentencing a 10-year-old Terran child for disruption of colony balance after stealing food rations withheld during a supply freeze. A lab schematic showing compact officials deploying an experimental population control agent through donated water systems on Terran-aligned fringe worlds. Each file ended with a verification tag, Com Terci Tag Integrity, confirmed. The streets didn't erupt. They fractured. Stone by stone, wall by wall, Compact's authority eroded. Not from fire, but from exposure. A teacher burned her compact credentials in front of her students. A station commander switched off the Allegiance beacon at the dock without orders. A retired magistrate walked into the center of a transit loop and left his badge on the floor. In one of the few remaining intact council outposts, a general slammed a palm against a cracked conference table. "Why didn't we strike first?" Another replied, "Because we thought they couldn't." "Then why didn't they?" A third voice came from the far end, young, cold, and without ceremony. "Because they wanted everyone to see?" The chamber fell still. Across the galaxy, the Compact's banners dropped from towers, not from enemy invasions, but from hands within. Earth had fired no weapons. It hadn't needed to. The Lyrian Gate had not pulsed in over 3 decades. Built as a relic of early intersystem travel, it stood dormant on the edge of the Compact's inner ring, framed by decaying orbital scaffolds and cold, unserviced antennae. For years, engineers debated dismantling it altogether. Its power signature unreadable, its internal pathways long since deprecated. Yet it remained. Quiet. Ignored. Until today. A single ignition flare surged through the gate's outer anchors. Not dramatic, clean and functional, like a switch flipping on a forgotten machine. Panels that hadn't lit in decades came alive in sequence. Each rune inscribed on the gateway's hull began to glow. Not with radiance, but with active alignment. In the Veltrin control hub, silence replaced status chatter. "Gate activity detected," a technician said, barely above a whisper. His hand hovered over the alert console, uncertain whether to engage in alarm. "Repeat that," the operations officer demanded. "It's real. Core coils at full calibration. We're receiving a ping." The officer moved closer. The technician's fingers hesitated over the panel. No origin tag, just a routing call. Internal. The room tensed. Then the Lyrian Gate roared. A pulse wave rippled from its central arc, scattering dormant debris outward in every direction. The viewing feeds blurred momentarily as the sensor arrays recalibrated. One by one, outlines began to take shape. Long, symmetrical, cold silhouettes cutting through the frame with nothing trailing behind them. 4. 4 Terran dreadnoughts, each marked with serial identifiers etched in outdated registry fonts, emerged from a gate that no longer officially existed. Not a word was spoken from any of them. In orbit over the compact capital, city sensors pinged emergency protocols. Planetary defense crews leapt into action. Rail arrays rotated into launch positions. Orbital shields primed for contact. Then every system froze. On the HUDs of command posts across the capital defense ring, a single message flashed in place of targeting data. Terranate accepted. Route chain reassigned. Host. Terror 1. A junior officer in the control tower stepped back from the terminal. "It's not a hack," he said, voice cracking. It's a transfer of ownership. System just acknowledged them as the priority route command." From above, the dreadnoughts didn't maneuver. They drifted, purposefully slow. Their hulls were not sleek. They bore the scars of old deployments, repair plates layered over unpolished exteriors, blackened grids where civilian freighters once masked subsystem ports. Inside Compact Assembly Hall, Counselor Orvek ran into the chamber, a comlink still buzzing in his hand. "Surrender 2. They're not transmitting any demands," he said breathlessly. "No hail, no warning. They're just there." The chamber, already thinned from weeks of defections and public walkouts, stood silent. "What is their formation?" asked a remaining defense minister. "They're aligned over each planetary capital. Same orbital pitch, same velocity, identical attitude lock." A projection flickered to life on the wall display. It showed one of the ships, flat, angular, every surface engineered for function over aesthetics. The Compact had always mocked Terran design for being outdated, inelegant. Now the same observers could see the logic. Every port hidden, every hull line compartmentalized, a command vessel without embellishment. Built not to impress, but to complete tasks. "What do they want?" someone finally asked. Everyone disappeared. Orvek replied, voice hollow. "That's the problem." On the ground below, citizens of the capital emerged from shelters and data towers. They looked up. The sky hadn't darkened completely, but a shadow stretched across the administrative sector. No sound accompanied the movement. The ship wasn't menacing. It didn't need to be. At the diplomatic quarters security tower, a Terran override loop engaged the planetary grid. Lights shut off in sequence. Surveillance towers powered down. Communications went dead. A maintenance worker, crouched near a circuit board, watched his tools lock up mid-calibration. The diagnostic reader flashed a single line before it disconnected. "Orbital shell unlinked, authority pending audit." He didn't know what it meant, but he knew enough to stand up and walk away. In the Compact's secondary defense chamber, technicians tried initiating manual fire control. The console rejected every sequence. "Local defense systems just disabled themselves," one officer said, sweat dripping down his temple. "Give me back visual lock," the lead coordinator snapped. The screen blinked. Instead of their orbital grid, it displayed the dreadnought closest to their hemisphere. Zoomed in, centered, locked. A Terran command code scrolled beneath it. Every line matched archival formatting. "Is this a bluff?" The answer came not in force, but stillness. No attack, no breach, just occupation. In Earth's command deck, Val monitored the gate's final readings. Status: L4 vessels are in orbit. Lock confirmation received. No conflict registered. Defense grid? Fully transferred. They handed it over willingly. The systems just needed a louder voice. Vale's expression didn't change. Transmit nothing. Let them sit with it. Across Compact-held systems, the effect rippled. Dreadnought silhouettes became the new sky. Civilian traffic halted. No patrols scrambled. Planetary governors issued no orders. There was no point. The control interface no longer recognized their inputs. In the public forum on Sailor Prime, a child pointed upward. Is that one of ours? His older brother shook his head. It's theirs now. In every hall of compact governance, the realization bled slow and sharp. Earth hadn't just returned. It had never really left. 2 days after the dreadnoughts anchored above the capitals, the first stabilization monitor touched down. It didn't arrive with escorts. No banners, no opening statement. Just a matte gray vessel with a Terran signature etched onto the hull like a manufacturing code. The hatch opened, and 6 operators stepped onto the soil of Veltron Prime's central government complex. Each wore the same sealed suit. No insignia, no rank, just a single vertical stripe on the right arm. No one greeted them. They didn't need it. Inside the compact's shattered administrative wing, the control servers had already begun to change. Without ceremony, monitors rebooted to new splash screens, white backgrounds with black text. Audit in progress. Terra Authority, confirmed. The first transmission from Earth was not diplomatic, legal, or even spoken. It was a system-wide timestamp sync, forcibly updating every server, shipboard clock, and orbital feed to Earth Standard Time. That single change did more damage than 1,000 warheads. Every invoice, trade ledger, criminal record, and command sequence now carried a Terran alignment signature. In a conference room that still smelled of spilled nutrient mix and burned fuses, what remained of the compact assembly sat hollow-eyed around a circular table. One of the counselors, hands trembling, lifted his data. Deportation hasn't shut anything down, he whispered. Trade routes are operational, freight docks are registering again. Under whose terms? Asked Counselor Brevik. His voice drained of the bravado that once filled 1,000 speeches. A technician entered, clutching a clipboard with shaking fingers. L lanes have been recertified as Terra-approved corridors. Anything outside the grid's been flagged as high risk. Insurance AI won't touch them. Civilian cargo fleets are rerouting now. What about enforcement? The technician gestured weakly. They didn't deploy enforcement. The council fell silent. On the orbital platform above Orobon, a crew chief stared through a viewport at one of the Terran dreadnoughts. It hadn't moved since arrival. Not a single bay opened. No transmissions. Yet every satellite in its orbit now responded to it. Defense systems defaulted to standby. Patrol schedules restructured to account for its mass and location. He turned to his logistics officer. So are we occupied? The man shook his head. Not occupied. We've been reclassified. In the civilian sectors, the shift arrived as policy updates. Quiet but absolute. Food shipments resumed. Medical lanes reopened. Access to restricted documents was reinstated. But every message bore the same footer. System integrity realigned. All operations under review. The new rules weren't brutal. They were immovable. Back on Earth, in the lower chamber beneath Strategic Command, Commander Jordan Vale stood before a panel that monitored compact-wide synchronization. Every screen on the wall showed green. Status of former executive nodes? He asked without looking back. His aide stepped forward. 32 stabilized, 11 pending, 3 declared non-compliant and quarantined. Vale nodded once. Send the monitors. Minimal presence, let the systems respond to them. We will, the aide said. Their systems think we're them now. Outside, the sky over Earth was quiet. Civilian life resumed. Markets opened. The same trams ran through the city's transport lines. But something fundamental had shifted. Earth no longer chased status. It assigned it. Across former compact territories, rebellion gave way to recalibration. Governors who had burned Earth symbols in their squares now quietly signed cooperation forms with Terran liaison teams. Their own systems had already adapted. Earth hadn't sent diplomats. Earth had sent auditors. On Tavern's Edge, a border world known for black market exchange routes, a trader stared at his cargo route rejection screen. He slammed his fist on the console. I've used that corridor for 15 years. His partner looked up from his display. It's not registered anymore. He scowled. By who? The reply came from the new banner that blinked along the bottom of the screen. Non-compliant node trade suspended. Reason, Uncertified access. Earthbound stamp required. In an alley 2 districts over, a smuggler discarded a case of forged IDs into a disposal unit. When asked why, he shrugged. Alley changed the lock. Doesn't matter how clever you are if the door isn't real anymore. On a neutral colony that once thrived under compact grants, the local broadcaster aired a public panel discussion. An elder statesman, once an advocate for neutrality, turned to the host and spoke without hesitation. Alley didn't invade, they didn't threaten, they didn't demand tribute. Then what did they do, the host asked. The old man's eyes didn't blink. Alley rewrote the ending. In the lower sectors of Eltron Prime, graffiti scrawled along security walls carried no symbols, just a sentence, repeated in different scripts. We need to run, ASAP. But no one was running. There was nowhere left to go. In the final chamber of Earth's Strategic Command, Vale addressed his team. They believed our silence meant submission, that patience meant weakness. They thought control was measured in fleet size, territory, or public declarations. He stepped toward the central display, watching as dozens of compact systems lit up with audit stamps. They never understood that silence was calibration. And by the time we finished, their systems belong to us. He turned. We don't take territory. We take structure. And we never give it back. Behind him, the monitors displayed a unified network, thousands of nodes, trade lines, and power exchanges, each now verified under one label. Terra operations stable. Earth didn't conquer. An embedded? And no one could unplug it now. If your enemy controlled every map, would you stay loud? Or go invisible until the map was yours? Drop your answer in the comments and tell us what kind of silent strategy, sleeper fleet, or buried protocol you'd want to see next in humanity's galactic arsenal. Like, subscribe, and stay locked in for more stories.